Hey everyone, welcome back to MetalDisciple.com's 365 Days of Metal. My name is George and this is day 332. Here in America today, we are celebrating Thanksgiving. To give the day a metal slant, I decided to give thanks for some music that is very special to me. 2 years ago around this time, I did a write-up about Dio Sacred Heart album, talking about how much the album meant to me. With a few minor changes, I'm bringing this article back for you today to once again give thanks for the master of the voice, who is Ronnie James Dio. The very first time I heard Ronnie James Dio was singing on the Black Sabbath album Mob Rules. At the time, I didn't know that this was in fact who I would come to know by his solo work as just Dio. Back in the early and mid-'80s, I used to frequent a music store at the Briarwood Mall in Ann Arbor, Michigan called Record Town. I would sift through the very small section they had dedicated to metal albums and pretty much decide what to get based on either word of mouth or coolness of the band name and or album art. By this time, the first 2 Dio albums had been released, and being an impressionable young lad, you know the Holy Diver album cover drew me in like a magnet. For whatever reason, though, it took me several trips before deciding to pick up a Dio album. But I was always drawn back because of that album cover. When I'd finally decided to take the plunge and pick up a Dio album, I got to Record Town and saw that there was a new third choice, Sacred Heart. If I'm checking out a band, I tend to start with their latest album and work my way backwards. The reasoning being that if they suck now, they probably sucked earlier too. That theory doesn't really hold water anymore, but at the time, it served me pretty well. So, rather than going with Holy Diver, I picked up Sacred Heart. As you can probably guess by the fact that I'm talking about it, I loved Sacred Heart. I've always had a special connection with it because it was my first Dio album, and I listened to it over and over and over again. Over the years, I've found that the rest of the world doesn't seem to share the same high opinion of the album, and I've never understood why. Every song on this album is great. If there's one song on the album that I like the least, it's the lead-off track, King of Rock and Roll. The faux live thing was a little goofy, but it's still a pretty catchy song. The title track, Sacred Heart, is one of my favorites on the album, and this album is full of songs I love to quote. Whenever you dream, you're holding the key. It opens the door to let you be free. With inspiring lines like that, along with the fantasy theme, there was no hope that I would not fall madly in worship with Ronnie James Dio. Another Lie is another good song. Rock and Roll Children. The lyrics are kind of cheesy, but I was a kid when this was released, so I could relate with wanting to run away from it all. Plus, it's a pretty catchy song. Hungry for Heaven, while seeming to have a religious slant based on the title, didn't really. Rather, lines like, just hold on, you can make it happen for you, reach for the stars and you will fly, continued to inspire me. From there on out, the rest of the album are all personal favorites, like The Beat of a Heart, Just Another Day, Fallen Angels, and Shoot Shoot. Ronnie James Dio had the power to take any group of words and instill them with so much power that it just drove them deep into your soul and tattooed them there forever. In Like the Beat of a Heart, the dramatic timing of the music, combined with the lyrics, now love can be a whisper, but pain will always shout to you, like the beat of a heart, is just so incredibly awesome that I cannot find words to express my adoration. I can nearly weep for its greatness. But it doesn't really matter what he says, he just sounds great saying it. On Fallen Angels, he sings, "Sins of the children never get washed away." And he could just as easily have been saying, "The stains on the children's clothes, tide washes it all away." And I'd be like, hell yeah, man, I gotta get me some Tide. The power of his voice was magical. When Ronnie passed, I cried like a little girl. For days. Not a constant stream of tears, but all I listened to for at least a week was Dio. And whenever he was on, at some point, I was bound to break down and blubber like a baby. The man was an icon and one of the greatest voices metal will ever hear. He was a big part of my musical life for well over 20 years, and from what I hear, he was a true gentleman as well. His like may never be seen again. I'm glad I got to see him perform a few times over the years. Everything he ever sang on is a gift and a treasure, but my favorite album will always be Sacred Heart. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. As usual, you can hear some songs from today's album on today's playlist. I'll be back tomorrow with more metal. Take care.